Hello, my darlings. Okay, so today we're going to go over how to write a research thesis, and you're going to have this on your outline. And the thing to keep in mind is that there are three main things that your thesis has to do. First, it can only be one sentence. I know you have a lot to say, and I know you have a lot to summarize, and you got to have an argument, but you have to do it in one sentence. More than one sentence, and it's too long. The second thing you need to make sure your thesis is doing is it needs to summarize your paper. All of those topics that you have, all those subtopics, need to somehow either have a word or a nod in your thesis, or else you have to get rid of that subtopic. And finally, it has to have an argument. It has to explain something or say that something made something else happen. So that can be complicated to do, but I'm going to walk you through the steps on how to do it. The first thing is go to this document where you have all of your research organized in categories and color coded. I find it's easiest to write down these categories so I have them all in one area as opposed to having to keep scrolling up and down. So, as an example, I have someone who did Al Capone, and their categories was that he had a rough early life, how he became a Chicago mob boss. He had a very public persona, which was sometimes considered generous. He committed a lot of crimes. He eventually went to jail, and then he died. So all of his facts fit into these six categories. So we got to figure out how to fit these six categories into the thesis, but also how to turn them into an argument. So when you are looking at those categories, I want you to think in terms of cause and effect. Something made something else happen. Now, a lot of people's topics are more complex like that. It would be wonderful if we could say an elephant's loss of habitat led to it being endangered. Unfortunately, there usually isn't just one cause and there usually isn't just one effect. So here's some other ways to think about it. Sometimes you can have multiple causes that all lead to one effect. So this might be climate change is caused by fossil fuels, agriculture, and the inability to make policy change. All have created uh, climate change. So these are three different things that caused this one thing to happen. You can also go the other way. This one thing has had these three effects. 9/11 caused tighter security at the airport. It caused the creation of the Homeland Security, and it also led to the persecution of many people who are Islamic. So this one thing had this effect. Additionally, you can have something that is a causal chain. This caused this, which had this effect. Hitler had a rough childhood, which led to a turbulent adulthood, which led him to want to become dictator. And so this caused this, which caused this. And you can even do a combination of these. So maybe you have two causes that lead to two effects. Maybe you have a cause that led to a cause that leads to these three effects. So change this however you like. Sometimes you can have these two causes create this effect, which then creates these two causes, which then creates these three effects. Whatever you need to do, whatever shape or version you need to have of this for it to make sense, go with it. But always be looking for what made something else happen. Here are some tips. If you are doing a person and you have numerous facts about their childhood, you can easily make the argument that who they are caused them to become, in their childhood, caused them to become what they did. Hitler's rough childhood caused him to become a vicious dictator. Um, So keep an eye out for that. Pete Rose's wonderful childhood and supportive father led him to become an amazing athlete. Some other ways you can think about this if you're doing a disease, uh, often you can talk about how there are causes, there are symptoms, and it needs to be cured. And maybe your argument is that is a disease that needs to be taken more seriously and have more funding. If you're doing an endangered animal, you can give some background, some information about why they're endangered and what people are doing about it. And again, make the argument that this is something people should be taking seriously. So there's another way of shaping that argument. Okay, so here's an example, and I'm going to float up here to the top. There we are. Okay, so here's an example of someone's categories once again, and his rough early life. I think, it was very turbulent. He didn't really feel connected, eventually led to him becoming a mob boss in Chicago because he originated in New York and he felt like he connected here. So this caused this, but him being a Chicago mob boss also left him to having a very public persona. It led him to commit various crimes, which then eventually led to his jail and his death. So this, which caused these two things, which caused these two things. Al Capone's early life led him to be a Chicago mob boss, where he became a famous criminal until jailed and eventually death. Okay, so let's take a look at this another way. Al Capone's early life, so here is where I talk about this, check. Led him to become a Chicago mob boss. I talk about that here and here. We're good. Where he became a famous. Famous is a nod to public life. If you have a public life, then you are famous. Criminal relates to crimes. So he became a famous criminal until jail. Talk about jail and eventual death. We talk about death. So we talk about all my categories, and I again have my causes and effect. This caused this, which caused these two, which caused these two. Now, there are different ways of writing a thesis. You can be vague or you can be specific. If you have a lot of little categories, it might be easier to have more vague terms and just explain it in detail later. So we don't have to actually talk about his crimes. We don't actually have to talk about what made him famous. We don't have to talk about what exactly in his early life led to that. If you only have a couple categories, maybe a specific one will work better for you. So maybe you talk about, if all you have is rough early life, becoming a Chicago mob boss, and jail, then you can talk about Al Capone's early life where he was abusive to others. So I'm more specific on his early life, led him to become a Chicago mob boss where he was involved in the St. Valentine's Day massacre and bootlegging. And what I should also have is which led him to jail, which got him jailed. So that is something I need to add into that thesis so that I can talk about it. So again, you can be specific or you can be vague. If you have a lot of like causes and effects, it's probably better to stay on the vague side. If you have like a pretty simple cause and effect, then you can very easily be more specific. So once again, here's where you're headed. You are going to write your thesis. You are going to make sure, once again, that it is one sentence, it summarizes, and it has an argument. Write that down someplace where you can easily find it later, where you eventually will put it on your outline. I know many of you are going to want to ask, is this a good thesis? Did I do this right? And I want to answer you. I really, really do. The problem is you are the expert on your field. So I don't know what your research is. I don't know how much you have on various things. So I can tell you if it's one sentence and I can kind of see if there's an argument, but I can't tell for sure if it's good until I see the rest of your stuff. So I will definitely take a look at it. We will look at it on your outline. Thank you for your time, and you guys have a lovely evening tonight.